Minister Benjamin Butterworth. Thank you so much. I'm so sad this is our last one in this hour. We've had great fun. And we're going to kick off, please, in the Times, because apparently off the table, ministers essentially arguing that it would drive out investment and damage growth.
Yes, well, this all started at this very desk, of course, because it was Neil Kinnock,
Yes.
Lord Kinnock, who said to Trevor Phillips that he supports a wealth tax on people with £10 million or more, and he claims that members of the Cabinet are very interested in the idea. Well, Jonathan Reynolds, who's the Business Secretary, has said categorically that it's a daft idea and that it won't happen. And in fact, it's not just that he's ruled it out, which to some people in the business world will be a relief, because there was a little alarm among that section of society. But also, it seems like a rebuke to the Labour backbenchers, to some of the newer Labour MPs who were suggesting this and backing this, because he says you have to get serious about how we deal with public finances and taxation. He points out, as other institutions have, that nowhere in the world has this been effectively applied. If you went back to 2000, there were a handful of countries that had tried wealth taxes. There are far fewer today, so that suggests other countries haven't succeeded with it. And he points out, what if your millions of pounds is in assets like fine wine or expensive art? Well, how would you levy the suggestion of 2% a year? Now, Richard Bergen, who's a left-wing Labour MP, says it's absolutely possible, and why should you balance the deficit issues on the backs of the poorest, which is an argument lots of people
I guess the backbenchers are saying, actually, this is a really missed opportunity to try to level out inequality in this country when there's very few options for Rachel Reeves in terms of her fiscal drag and how much money she has.
Yeah, there are fewer options. There's a suggestion that she's reclaimed some Bitcoin worth £5 billion. That's been in the papers. There's a suggestion of a tourism tax, which could raise maybe the best part of £1 billion. But, you know, they are struggling to find the answers, and here is an answer. But what was the central mission of this Labour government when it came to power growth? Is a decision like this on people with money to invest, people that tend to own successful businesses, to have made that kind of profit, is this going to encourage them to invest and to generate growth, which generates long-term taxes? I think that is probably the more pertinent question.
Interesting line from Mel Schneider, the Shadow Chancellor, saying all of this plays into the fact that it looks like that Rachel Reeves has maxed out the credit cards, India.
It does, doesn't it? And I would agree with you. I think that question that you just asked at the end, does this actually encourage growth, is the important one. And no, as you said, since the 1990s, we've seen 12 countries repeal their wealth taxes. I think it pushes capital abroad. It leads to elaborate avoidance schemes and would discourage inward investment. So I think in the long term, it's very high risk. And I think the amount that you'd have to apply would be so high, and they'd leave. They would just leave.
Well, I think it would probably be the wrong move for the economy, and we're competing with places like the UAE, which have extremely low tax thresholds, and that's where our talent is going. But on the flip side, we have a fundamental problem that the taxes we are having to apply to income are problematically high. They are preventing investment because people can't take risks in businesses when they have no disposable income, and yet assets stating in value in perpetuity, and then people are taking that money out so that they're avoiding paying the most basic levels of taxes. That as a system is unsustainable and not how it worked in the last century. And so, you know, there has to be something along these lines. Otherwise, it will be people on average incomes paying even higher taxes, which is what we see right across the West.
OK, let's move on now, please. The front page of The Sun. This is Greg Wallace and his first interview with a newspaper. A 60-year-old was sacked from the BBC in that BBC show MasterChef.
Yes. So as you mentioned, this is his first newspaper sacked by the BBC. He was on MasterChef with his co-presenter John Turode for many years. So in this interview, he says, you know, I'm not saying that I'm not guilty of stuff, but so much has been perceived incorrectly, i.e. saying he's not a sexist or a misogynist. But this comes after an independent legal review upheld 45 complaints out of 83 made against him. And this was about his conduct at work, of course. It resulted in him being fired. They related to inappropriate and sexually explicit comments, 3 instances of being in a state of undress. One of the more serious claims he actually addresses on a groping allegation in the interview, and he says it was a bad and drunk attempt at flirting. But he also, you know, he talks about his late diagnosis of autism, his behaviour, which the BBC did take it, or the independent investigation and legal review did take into account. But, you know, the fact is that 45 complaints were upheld. So I think he's really saying, I don't want to be mentioned in the same breath as Jimmy Savile and Hugh Edwards. I find that really unfair. I'm not wrong, and, you know, but did I make some bad judgment calls? Yes. But, you know, I think the BBC's decision, actually, they announced this week that they'd air the series featuring John and Greg Wallace. They're going to give them limited screen time, and they're going to focus on the contestants because they didn't think it was fair to sort of take away that opportunity from the people that worked so hard.
Bad options, he said, Greg Wallace, but for those who are involved, which would often be young researchers on freelance contracts, it would be traumatising experiences.
Exactly. It's about the power as much as the actions in themselves, because those actions can land in a very aggressive way when coming from somebody that holds your future and your opportunities in their hands. And that's, I think the problem is here, it's not just the inappropriate behaviour the report found Greg Wallace to have done, it's the production company and it's the BBC. Because actually, who's really in charge of the TV programme? It's the editor, it's the person with the money deciding who's paid what. And why didn't they confront this before? Why didn't they deal with this abuse of power and inappropriate behaviour? Even Wallace didn't realise what he was doing, which I'm afraid for a middle-aged adult man, he ought to have had a bit more self-awareness. I'm not buying his excuse. But actually, it's the employer who should have dealt with that and addressed that balance. And that's why the production company and the BBC should hold some responsibility.
Yeah, Shelf entering John Torode, he released a statement, didn't he? He insisted that he had absolutely no recollection of the alleged incident involving him, and he went on to say he didn't believe that it had actually happened, adding racial language is wholly unacceptable in any environment. I'm sure there's so much more to come on that story, but for now we'll leave it there. We move on to a curious story in the Times. The American who claims to be a royal love child. I love this headline. Tell us more.
Victoria's Secret. It's a fun little story. So it's about the relationship between Queen Victoria and her manservant John Brown. They may have had a secret child whose descendants now apparently live in Minnesota. And you can see one of the descendants, Angela Webb Milinkovich, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, a care worker in Minnesota who says, by any standard, she does not fit the royal bill. She's got a mullet, a nose piercing, and lots of tattoos. But she says she's grown up within her family, believing that Victoria and John had a romantic relationship and that a child was produced on a long boat journey that the pair had together, and which then led to her family. And then this is backed by a historian called Dr. Fern Riddle, who's delved into this for a new book titled Victoria's Secret, that's also going to become a documentary, and believes Angela actually may be a descendant of Victoria, and she calls John Victoria's de facto royal consort for 20 years. So her consort, basically, that was really, that she became extremely dependent on him, especially in the years that Prince Albert died. And though Victoria always dismissed rumours of their affair as ill-natured gossip, Dr. Riddle has uncovered very convincing tidbits, actually, I think, in this story, that includes a cast of Brown's hand that she requested be made, and she did the same for Albert.
Okay.
And also is buried with a lock of his hair, his mother's ring, and a picture of him. So
Victoria?
Yes.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, so...
Have you ever heard anything on this story as a royal correspondent?
No, I hadn't, and I'm so happy it's come back into the public eye, because apparently previous things that were previously known that Dr. Riddle hadn't discovered now is that her bedroom was right next to his as well. I know.
Was it ever covered in The Crown?
I know. I didn't think it was.
Because I feel like if it's in The Crown, then it's true.
It didn't go that far back. But there was also an alleged confession from one of her chaplains that they secretly married. So crazy.
Wow. Isn't it? We await the results of a DNA test with bated breath. Love that story. OK. Benjamin, take us on to Lapland melting. What is this in a Daily Telegraph today?
Yes. So Santa is getting hot, I'm afraid. Because in the Arctic Circle, it has reached temperatures of 31 degrees. Now, it's been above 25 degrees for, I think it was 12 days. It's been that hot. This is unprecedented for this part of the world. The clue is kind of in the name. And it's the hottest temperature since they started taking records there, which was, albeit only in the 1960s. And it's raising concerns about the acceleration of climate change and also about the tourism industry for that part of the world. People say they are still going to visit Santa, and he's OK, so there is some relief in the news. But for the rest of us, the rising sea levels and rapid acceleration of climate change is quite something. And for those people that say that global warming isn't happening, I think when...
There are many voices,
there are. When you've got more than 30 degrees in the Arctic Circle, which is, what a generation ago you got in Spain in summer, when that has made it to the tip of Norway, then I think that should alarm us all.
Yeah, I was quite surprised in this. There is a Santa Claus village that people can go and visit the big man himself.
You don't hear
7 days a week.
Usually.
No, I just always imagined you put that sack away, feet up, watching something on telly, maybe the Sky News Review on a weekend. Who knows? But I do also think this story is very important with a very serious message. Now, Leah, take me through a row over some famous tapestry that's going on currently. And this is in the Daily Mail.
The Bayeux Tapestry, exactly. So a historian is saying it should be renamed the Canterbury Embroidery for two reasons. So Dr. David Musgrove, the historian, saying that it was likely woven in Kent, not France, by an Anglo-Saxon seamstress, and that tapestries are made using a loom, while this is an embroidery apparently that's traditionally made with needle and thread. And this obviously comes before it's going on display at the British Museum next year. So he says this is an apt time to rename it and to address the fact that it was probably made in Kent and not in France.
Are you a tapestry fan, Benjamin?
Not a question I've ever pondered, Leah. I think it'll be great to have it in the UK. I think maybe renaming it while it's here might not be a treat for Anglo-Franco relations.
No. Love it. Oh, thank you so much for your company, and thank you to everyone at home for watching too. See you soon.
Turkey is burying its dead.